It is amazing. I mean, there are definitely some compounds that have some health concerns at very low concentrations, but we have analytical instrumentation today that we can look for the minute concentrations in the environment. And you find it even in very pristine settings. Mm-hmm. We have looked at mountain runoff in the Rocky Mountains. Even in snowmelt, you find some of these constituents you wouldn't expect to find.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get a question from one of our viewers right now. We have a question from a caller coming up right now.
My name is Alan Sharp, ALLENSHARPE, and I'm from Plant City, Florida. My question is it really safe to drink directly from the tap? Is it just a myth that bottled water is safer?
Andy, you want to take that one? Is it safe to drink from the tap? So many people are buying bottled water
absolutely.
right now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's safe to drink from the tap. The EPA and the state regulators have done a great job protecting public health. It's a really interesting question because if you start looking at the bottled water, you find that a lot of times bottled water is actually tap water that's been through a machine where there's no treatment at all. Sometimes there's much higher levels of treatment than would be considered necessary. On top of that, you've got all the issues with the plastics, and some of these plastics actually leach things into the water. So absolutely, I'm a tap water guy.
So Andy, at home you drink tap water?
Oh yeah, I carry my little bottle around and fill it up everywhere I go.
So why do you think so much of the public, though, doesn't trust the water out of the tap? Why do you think that is?
I think that, now you're asking an engineer a public issue here, but I think it's really a perception that somehow if you're buying something out of a freezer at the store, it comes in a package, that somehow it is pure. Whereas as I've said, I think our local utilities have done a fantastic job creating equal or higher quality water and a lot less expensive.
So. Bart, let me ask you, going back to that question, the grain of sand within Ray J Stadium. Is it necessary? Should we try to get everything out of our wastewater as we treat it and put it back into the system?
That's an interesting question because unlike other businesses who create a product for different consumers, we don't look at our consumers and says this is what you need. The EPA says this is what you'll treat your water to and this is what everybody will have. As far as our discharges, as Jorg mentioned, to get down to the new levels, we will have to treat the water to the level he said at 0.56 milligrams per liter nitrogen. It will be too pure to drink straight out of the system.
What do you mean too pure?
It'll be too pure, it'll be devoid of minerals that humans need to have in their water to consume it. And so as he mentioned, we'd have to put minerals back in to the water so it's safe for us.
You know, one of the things that I want to ask all three of you, one of the questions that's arisen recently is that we now detect levels of caffeine, we detect levels of pharmaceuticals in our streams and rivers, and even in some near oceans near the shore, near major cities. And I wonder, how important is it to rid our drinking water of all traces of pharmaceuticals or caffeine or some of these interesting substances that we're beginning to note that are in our water?
Maybe I'll let Jorg start on that, and then I'll tap in.
Well, it's definitely true, but it's probably also a price of civilization that we find these constituents which do play a role, beside caffeine is maybe up for question, but pharmaceuticals definitely play an important role in our daily life, and many other chemicals such as flame retardants are very important. And you see that some of these compounds are making it into waterways, and we can find them and trace them at very minute concentrations. Is there a health risk? Not necessarily. So we need to really, I think, find the proper balance between where's the risk to public health and how far we want to treat.
But somebody hears flame retardants and they know that they're associated with cancers at certain levels. So they say, why is that my drinking water? Why should we allow? What's the case to be made that you can allow a certain level of flame retardants to end up in the water?
Well, there are definitely certain risks we accept in our daily life, right? We drive a car, and if you look at the risk we have by drinking tap water, which might have a minute concentration of these flame retardants, and we compare it to the risk that we're exposed to by living our life, that's a really minute risk. It's 1 in a million. So the cancer risk we have faced today in this country is 1 in 3 and 1 out of 4 is likely to get cancer, and that's not coming from drinking water. That's coming from many other sources potentially.
Andy, did you want to add to that?
Well, a couple things. Yeah. So the relative exposure is something that people should consider. So you can go to these extremely high levels of treatment, which come with a very high level of cost. If you were wanting to get out this as you said, the grain of sand in the football stadium, so you could go to that extent, and you're going to pay the dollars to build the facility. You're going to have the energy that you're using to run the facility and the cost to operate it. And have you really improved public health is an important question, because coming out for this today or yesterday, I flew out on a plane where I got my fill of exposures of flame retardants. They're all over any kind of transportation that you take. The other thing is that there is actually recently completed a very detailed study right here in Florida, looking at, well, if we wanted to remove them, not should we, but if we wanted to, what are the costs, and laying out the technologies. And it can be pretty expensive, depending on how far you want to go. So it's really a balance between, of course, public health is the top priority, but then you say, okay, well, what is the advantage of additional treatment?
Bart, what would you say to that? Well,
to add to that, we've looked at what it would cost for us to treat all of our water down to the level that's proposed or was proposed by EPA in January. And that cost is $300 to $500 million to build, and then more money to operate. That would create at least 100% rate increase on our wastewater system. So we would be raising rates tremendously. Right. Something unprecedented.
All right, well, let's continue with that thought. We can clean the water, but how do we do it, and what's the cost? We've asked Carter to take a look at the yuck factor.